All right, everyone. So in the last video, I kind of talked about kind of the stages of prototyping. Here, we're going to work on one specific stage, and that is wireframing. Okay. Wireframing is the concept of, as I mentioned, kind of laying out key elements. Okay. We're not really worried about, specific images or specific colors or even like specific, um, logos or anything like that. We're just kind of like laying out kind of key elements. Like there's a banner, it goes here. There's a, text, it goes there kind of situation. Okay. So, I kind of went over in the last video the various stages of prototyping. And like I said, wireframing is kind of a more formal version of a sketch. Um, you know, this is kind of like, a nice example. This is something you might put into like a presentation or something like that if you're presenting it to stakeholders like your boss or a client or something like that. And like a sketch, a wireframe is meant to illustrate information so it can be easily understood at a glance. At the stage, the main purpose is to create a general layout. You can even, use icons. I can show you guys, I'll show you guys if you can find some really quick, easy icons to work with. So, how detailed you want to make the wireframe is kind of up to you. This is kind of a hand-drawn one, and you can kind of see oops, sorry. Where's my hand tool? Let's open this one into preview. All right. So, here in this example, you can see that obviously, this is for an app layout. Um, you can see that it's like, or actually, it might be a website, sorry. But it's like, okay, here's how the desktop looks. There's a logo, there's a tagline. They literally didn't even write it out. This like is kind of meant to represent an image. They put, this is a video. There's like a little circle, whatever you want to call those there. Okay. This one's a little more formal, obviously, looks a little nicer. They're using grayscale. Notice that they're not really working with color or images. They do use this particular person uses red mostly to sort of show like functionality or just kind of to label things, slide to move kind of thing, or menu on footer or something like that. Okay. So, think of a wireframe like a rough draft. Okay. It lays out key ideas. Here's another example. Kind of looks like it was done with like a sketching program, like Procreate or something. It's got that kind of like faux watercolor feel. So once again, it's like, you can see examples of it's like, all right, this is going to be like a post, and there's some icons and, this is representing people making comments, but it's not very detailed, right? But it gets across the idea of the general layout, right? Same thing here. It's like, all right, here's some social media icons. There's an ad there. There's a chat box. There's this background. There's kind of this tab here. Boom, 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 right? Here's some general tips. Be clear about your objective. you know, this kind of goes back when I was talking about programming, where it's like, make sure you define the problem. Make sure you define what you're trying to do with this wireframe, right? Like, what are you trying to get across with your layout? Are the things you're trying to emphasize, like a text feed, are there certain text you're trying to emphasize, or a chat box or something like that? Um, so, try to think about things before you just kind of jump in and start doing things. Typically when you work on a wireframe, this is something that's going to be worked on with other people, or it has to be approved and or worked on with other people. like stakeholders. It helps if you can kind of do it together. There's lots of sharing software. Actually, Figma, which I'll show you guys, has the ability to work live and share with other people. Um, think about the user. We're not going to talk about user experience just yet, but one thing about working in a wireframe is you got to think about the people. Don't think about what you want. Think about what the user, the person who's actually going to use this website wants. So, in the think about for instance your project, your assignment 2. Let's say you're doing a project where you click on a image and it of a dog and it changes to a cat or something like that. Like who wants that? You know what I mean? And I don't mean that like in a dismissive way. I mean like who really wants who's going to be the person who interacts with this, right? And what does that person want and what kind of interface does that person want? Don't think about what you, the developer, want. Think about what the actual end user wants to have. Don't use color, at least unless it's meant to really emphasize something. So color, typically it's a good idea to keep these, in all these examples, notice how they're all pretty much grayscale, right? There's no real color. And that's by design because color kind of distracts people. Also, I can tell you this, clients a lot of times might be a little too literal. Like sometimes you're just like, this is the general, but if you start putting in color, they think that's going to be the color of the final website or the app or whatever. And they're going to be like, wait, we don't want this color. That's not our brand. And like, yeah, I know, this is just a placeholder. But, to avoid that problem, using grayscale kind of gets around that because they almost never think that grayscale is like the final color. But if you put any color in, they're going to start having a 20-minute long conversation that you didn't want about why that's not the right color. Um, Consistency, you may have multiple wireframes, if you have multiple pages or multiple screens for like a game or an app or something like that. So make sure you're consistent. So if you use let's say I use a certain gray to represent an image, always use that same gray or always use the same icon. That way people, if something's meant to be an image, always use that same kind of iconography, if that makes sense. Because if you start changing it around on the same project, people don't necessarily know that they represent the same thing. And that can be kind of confusing to people. And another thing is a lot of this is meant to be practice non-attachment. And what I mean by that is the whole point of wireframes is that they're not too precious, okay? They're not meant to be like this final cool looking thing that you're going to wow people with in your portfolio. They're just meant to be a general starting point of layout and, key elements, right? So don't worry, don't if you end up tossing it away, or whatever, that's fine, okay? Chances are things will change, they almost always do. So don't get too attached to any one element. That's kind of the point. We don't want to worry about that kind of stuff now. Eventually, you will get to that level of like a mock-up where it's like, okay, this is what the final will look like. But for now, we're not doing that. Okay. So I have videos for you that go over Figma. Figma is a really nice prototyping software. It's free. So some of you may have worked with Adobe XD or Sketch, or those are great too. I'm not here to necessarily promote any one specific tool. The reason why I'm promoting we're using Figma is mostly because it's free. And it's just easier as a teacher to work with free software because then there's not a issue between people trying to use it. So, you could go to Figma. You can log in and set up an account for free. That's all you'll need for this class if you choose to use Figma. You don't need any expensive stuff. Okay. And what we're going to do is I'm going to log into Figma. I just use my Gmail because I'm lazy and I want Google to have all of my information. All right. So I'm not going to go over like the main using of Figma. I have some videos that will go over that. If you already know how to use Illustrator, which I'm assuming most of you do, then learning Figma is pretty simple. It's a very basic vector-based program, which means it has fills and strokes. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to build or wireframe the front page of San Francisco's website here. Okay. It's going to be a little difficult because I don't know if I have enough space, but I'll try. So I'm going to wireframe it. I'm in Figma and I'm just going to create a new document. And the first thing you need to do in Figma is create what's called there's a canvas. I'm blank here. Sorry, a frame. Okay. And a frame is essentially like an artboard in Illustrator. I can click and drag, or you can actually use presets. So this is the frame button here, and you'll actually see it kind of comes with some presets for like, this is for phones, like it gives you common, Android and iPhone sizes. There's common tablet sizes. In this class, since we're pretty much using desktop computers, there's a desktop section. So these are kind of giving you basic sizes. So let's just say for the sake of argument, this is going to be a MacBook Air. Okay, so this is setting up the dimensions. This is your properties window. It's contextual, which means it updates depending on what you currently have. So if I highlight this, this gives me information about the frame. This is actually giving me my dimensions right there. So if you wanted to change the dimensions, you could either type it here. As you can see, I'm changing the width, or you can do it manually by using the selection tool here. Okay. And what you can, just to create a wireframe, basically kind of look at what you're trying to do and just really, break it down into simple settings here. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to start here. Actually, I'm just going to kind of take a screenshot here and work from that. I'll give you this as a PDF. The reason why I'm doing this is so I can shrink the size without changing the layout. Like this. All right. All right, so I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to start by creating this and just click and drag. Okay, this is going to be the backing. And then I'm just going to add some text, create this part. So when you do a wireframe, sometimes you might want to add text, sometimes you don't. If it's really important text, like the name of a company, you might want to do that. So San Francisco State University. I'm going to highlight this and scroll down. Maybe set this to bold. Okay. Try to build this search bar here. And I'm just gonna, this will just be a rectangle. I'm gonna change the fill color here from gray to white. And if you actually want to get this kind of rounded edge, like we have here, you can actually do that here under the properties. Where is it? Sorry, they changed the interface a little bit. Transform, it used to be constraints. No, where did they put it? Oh, here it is. Corner radius used to be up here, but they've changed the layout in the last year or so. There you go. Okay. And then I'm going to add this part. So let's add some more text. Y A through Z. Oops. Calendar and then login. Okay. I don't want this to be bold. Now I'm not matching the exact font, but I'm not really worried about that. I also probably want this a little smaller. That's about right. Now, one key aspect of working in Figma or creating a wireframe is you probably want to organize. So I have these layers here. And so this right now is this rectangle 1. This is rectangle 2. I'm going to call this, double click to name it. I'll call this header backer. And then I'm going to call this one search bar. And what I'm going to do is actually organize all these together as a group. You can do that by highlighting them, use Command or Control G to group. And I'm just going to call this header. It's kind of one group. All right. And then next, let's do the nav bar. I'm going to draw this and just make this a little bit darker or just a different color so we can easily tell. All right. And then you can decide whether you want to put, these or not. I'll do it, I suppose, just to kind of. So I think the various ones were about academics, admission and aid. Student success. Student life. Faculty and staff. Alumni. Give and quick links. Okay. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. I'm also going to not have it bold. All right. I'm also just going to put some spaces here. I'm just going to use this space bar. That's pretty good. All right. Next is like, there's this big button here or this big picture. I'm not going to draw that. I'm just going to kind of, I'm going to put this text, but I'm just going to kind of like put this as one image. So I'm just going to have an image here, or I'm just going to draw a rectangle. And this is just going to represent my image. I can even kind of like, if you want to really kind of sell it, maybe I'll put like some lines here. Okay. I'm going to group all these. I'm going to call this like a splash image. Okay. And I'll put the text on top of it, which is this part, because that is kind of important. So you notice I'm just kind of using these very basic vector tools. One day, one community, endless impact. I'm not going to worry about the other text. One day, one community. Endless impact. Okay. And maybe I'll make that a little bigger. All right. I'm not going to do this line. Instead, what I'm going to do is just kind of I like to use sort of dark rectangles to kind of represent, text. And once again, I'm going to start to kind of organize this stuff. So for instance, I'm going to put this and this together. This is going to be navigation bar. This and this I'm going to put together. This is going to be my splash area. This is just so you can kind of organize things together. You can lock and hide things just like in Illustrator or other kind of graphic design programs. I'm going to click on this, and then I'm actually going to drag this lower. And I'm not going to do all of this because there's a lot, but I'm going to do this part here. And then I'm going to do this part. The reason why I'm doing this part is there's actually some icons that I want to use. Okay. But hopefully you get kind of the idea of what we're doing here. All right, so what I'm going to do here is like, all right, this is going to be one area. I'm not going to write all of this text. That's a lot of text. Instead, I'm just going to use kind of like rectangles to represent that text. So I'm going to do this part. So I probably will do the welcome to San Francisco State because that's kind of important. Once again, I'm not worried about like what font I'm using. I'm just going to place that there. I can even do that line and just hold down shift to get a nice perpendicular line. This is my line weight, just like in Illustrator. You're gonna notice there's a lot of similarities between this and Illustrator. I'm actually going to, well, anyway, let's draw another rectangle to represent this text. It's here. I usually like to make my text rectangles kind of dark. All right, what I'm going to do is do one of these and then just kind of copy and paste it. So I will put the text because it's so big. Let's do that to 9. And I'll make that bold because I make it so big. And I'm just going to make that really big. But I'm not going to do everything. So instead, what I'm going to do is click this. And I'm going to show you guys a nice, easy way to save time, which is Option or Alt drag. So if I just kind of Alt drag and then Alt drag. Okay. This is kind of aligned over here. So I'm going to take this and all of this. And you can actually, they have built-in alignment. I'm going to align this to the left like that. And I'm going to organize all of these together. I'm just going to call this text group. And then what I'm going to do is kind of just option drag to get these. And I'm going to kind of combine all of this together. I'll call it like welcome. Okay. I would go back and I can kind of edit this. So this is like, 8. So over here, 30%. Okay. And then I'm gonna do this learn about, and you can kind of see it's like it's this text, and then there's kind of like, a photo and then some text about it, and there's like 4 of them in a row. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually just gonna copy this because I'm lazy. I'll just change this text. So that was an option drag, learn about SF state. All right, then I'm going to have that. Oops. So my photo should be kind of like that. And I'm just doing option drag to make the text. And then this is supposed to be the link. Like I said, I'm not worried about what the text says. I'm not, because these are different elements. This is a photo and this is hyperlink. I might change these a little bit so they're not exactly the same. That just shows that they're meant to be different things. Okay. I'm going to highlight this, group them. I might call it like image or, kind of like an article or something, but I don't know. I don't know. You can come up with your own term. And there's 4 of them. So option drag, option drag. All right, so I made them a little too big. And actually, I'm going to distribute these equally by using distribute horizontal spacing. Oops, not like that though. I'm actually going to highlight all of these. Let's just shrink it down. I don't know why this one is so. There we go. Distribute horizontal. There we go. And I'll do this part. So let's raise this up. All right. This I'm just going to call article section. And I'm actually about needs to be into here. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in. Okay. And let's drag and drop academic programs. So hopefully you're kind of noticing that it's like, I'm trying to use kind of like shortcuts just to kind of save myself some time. So this is like a big old image, right? So I'm just going to represent that with like a rectangle. I might need to make this a little bigger. I'm going to match this color by just sampling it, just so that they're kind of the same. To be honest, I might make this actually, because this is also an image. Let's have them all be kind of the same, just so they're consistent. And that means maybe this should be a slightly lighter color, so it's easier to read. Okay. All right, and then this is just going to be a bunch of text. Links here. Since these are hyperlinks, I'm going to make them a little bit of a different color. I'll probably use the same color I did there, since this kind of dark gray kind of represents hyperlinks now. Such. All right, and then I'm just going to kind of combine all this together. Let's call this academic programs, because that's what it's called here on the website. You don't have to organize. I just feel like, this is just a lot easier. I'm gonna call this actually learn about SF State, because that's what the title was called. And let's drag it into there. Okay. Looking good. Last part, so I'm jumping over some stuff because, to be honest, the other parts of the website are kind of, we could do it, but it's pretty much like I just did. There's nothing really new in it. I want to get to here though, because there's some icons, and I want to talk a little bit about working with icons because I think that's important. So I'm going to come in here. Let's open up, and I'm going to try to create the footer here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, let's go back to Figma. All right, so what I want to do, the footer really has this, which is the San Francisco State icon. Got some text, more text, more text, and then it has a bunch of social media links, right? It's right here, as you guys can see, right? So let's do that. This will just be so I'll make a backing just because this is already kind of a different color, like that. Let's make the San Francisco State. This is supposed to be the icon right there. I'll make these really quickly. It's really like 3 kind of columns of text. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of group these. Let's just meet up at the top. Boom. And then boom. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to bring in, so this is a vector program. And so if you guys are familiar with using the pen tool, there is actually a pen tool. That's a lot of work though. And so in this class, like you don't get extra credit for making your own stuff. The point of this project is to be fast, right? So it's a lot of times easier to go find the icons and get them rather than try to create them yourself. So what I've actually done, I've given you guys a couple places you can find icons. Okay. Here's one that I like called flat icon. You basically can search for any icon you want. So for instance, let's say I was looking for a user icon. Okay. Like that. I could click. Now, the way it works here is that you can get raster files for free, which is the PNG, and you can get them at different sizes. If you want to have it as a vector format, like an SVG, you'd have to have a paid account. Okay. You don't need to do that for this class, but just be aware. So that's one place I could get icons. Another place is what's called the Noun Project, which is another kind of similar site. So if I were to do, once again, like user icon. Now for this particular website, it is free, but you do have to have an account because everything on the internet makes you have an account these days. So let's say I wanted to use this icon. If you click on it and you're logged in, now technically the way it works is if you're going to use it and you don't pay a licensing right, you're supposed to give attribution, which means the name of the artist, which in this case is untitled. So if you click on the free, you have to as long as you attribute, that's fine. That's Creative Commons. And you can actually download it as a actual SVG, which is a vector format. If I click on this, download SVG, download PNG. So if I download this would be a vector format, which you could bring into Figma, since Figma is vector-based. Another one you might want to do is if you took the 228 class, or you may have learned this in another sort of web development class, there's something called Font Awesome. Font Awesome is what we call an icon font. And it actually has a bunch of icons. So for instance, if I came in here and I say, TikTok, let's say for some reason I want a TikTok logo, I could click on this and you can actually click right here and this will download an SVG version. Okay, so I could download this as a vector format. Okay, so any of those are fine. I actually give you the files for today. So you don't have to do that, but this is where you could find them. So I give you some icons, which include the Facebook, Instagram, and all that sort of stuff. What I'm going to do is to bring those in, I'm going to click and go to image or video. Let's start with just Facebook. I can click and drag. Okay. And you can see it's actually giving me a black background. If you want to change the color, So for instance, maybe if you'll notice here on the actual website of, I might have closed it, but let's go back. You might notice that the actual background is, there are, they're white. If I wanted to change that, I could double click. If it is vector based, actually vector and not a raster, you could change the fill actually here in Figma. So if I click here, I can actually change that to white. So let's just say I want to change it to like, I don't know, like an off gray or something. I could do that without having to take it to Illustrator or some other program. I'm just going to grab the other three, which I actually think are set to white. So I'm going to do that one, and that one. So they're all kind of gray, I believe. I'm kind of changing the color. Oh, that's already Instagram. Let's grab LinkedIn. So I'm gonna click on this, fill. Okay. So it goes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'll put this one, oops, there. All right. Let's say I wanted them evenly kind of distributed. I'm gonna highlight all four of these, and let's do evenly horizontal spaced. Okay. All right, and that's my wireframe. Okay. What I'm going to do is highlight this, and I'm going to go and let's just type in something. I'm just going to call this SFSU wireframe. Whatever you call the artboard, that's actually going to be the name of it when you export it. So it's just, you figure that name out. Now to export out of Figma, what you could do is you highlight the artboard itself or the canvas, and I'm going to go under export. And you can decide whether you want it as like a JPEG or a PNG or like a PDF. So if I click on PDF, I'm going to hit export export SFSU wireframe. And then there you go. Okay. All right. And so that's the basics of wireframing. Okay.